everybody, and welcome to another episode of Cinema Heroes. I'm Justin Speck.
I'm Jay Stu.
And today we're talking about top 10 opening scenes of all time. Our favorite top 10 opening scenes. We've really been enjoying doing these top 10 lists, so we got another one. Without further ado, I think let's just jump right into it. Let's just get started.
Absolutely.
You know, no introduction really needed. I will begin. My number 10 is a very long scene. I actually just watched it while I was waiting for you to log on. And that is 2002's Gangs of New York, directed by Martin Scorsese. I debated on whether or not this was a cheat, because technically the very opening scene is just Liam Neeson talking to his young son, Amsterdam. But it's really like the prologue of the film. It's the first 15 minutes of the movie. They're gearing up for battle, and then they meet Daniel Day-Lewis's character, Billy the Butcher, or Bill the Butcher, out. I think I said Billy the Butcher because of the boys. Anyway, Bill the Butcher out in the like main 5 points area, and they do this back and forth, and then they go into battle, and I was hooked when I saw that movie for the first time. I thought it was just such a cool opening scene. Rewatching it just now, it's a tiny bit dated in terms of film technique. It's Scorsese, so it's still amazing, but like there's some kind of early 2000s kind of cinematography, I guess you could say, that happens where like they do kind of the weird frame rate thing where it's kind of almost choppy, kind of like type of thing during the battle. Yeah, but otherwise I think it still holds up a whole lot, and I love it. And I was from those first 15 minutes Daniel Day-Lewis became one of my favorite actors ever, just from that. This is the first Daniel Day-Lewis movie I ever saw. And so I was instantly like, this guy is amazing.
I've never seen Gangs of New York.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So that I got to add that to my list. That's another one I got to watch, man.
Yep.
But I'm going to take your word for it. My number 10 is one that I know is definitely not on your list. Well, it might be, but I don't think it is. And this is definitely a movie from my generation. And that is the opening scene to Final Destination 2.
That is not on my list. That is a good one.
Opening scene has scarred a generation of people. So what Jaws did for going into the ocean, Final Destination 2 did for driving behind log trucks.
Absolutely.
That opening scene is crazy because we've seen the Final Destination movies at all. It opens up with a dream sequence, but that is by far the best one. Mm-hmm. There are other great opening sequences in that franchise, but Final Destination 2 is the one that sticks out. That it immediately, when you see a log truck, you automatically think Final Destination 2. So yeah, that I had to put that on the list.
Yeah. I definitely can understand that. And you're absolutely right. Anytime I'm on the highway, if there is a log truck in front of me, you're like, nope. Getting over. Not today. My number 9 is a movie that I believe you have also not seen, which needs to be changed soon. I could be wrong. You may have watched this, but I don't think you have. And that is 1994's Pulp Fiction, directed by Quentin Tarantino.
I haven't watched that yet. I think that's one of 2 Tarantino movies I haven't seen.
Yeah. I really would love to watch it with you. But and actually, my wife was just talking about it the other day, because I think I was telling her about this list and which movies I was thinking about including. And she was like, man, I can't even tell you the last time I saw Pulp Fiction. So I was like, I'd be happy to rewatch it with you, because it's one of my favorites. And the opening scene it's a dialogue scene. It's 2 people in a diner. And, it's not really spoiling anything, but they start to talk about.
I've seen it. I've seen the opening scene.
Oh, you've seen the opening scene? Okay. They start to discuss about like, why don't we rob a coffee shop? There's lots of wallets here and stuff. And then they decide to finally do it. They kind of work themselves up. They kiss, and then they announce that they're robbing the place, and then opening credits roll, and you're just like, what was that? So it's I love that opening scene. I thought it's so good.
Good choice. I've seen that opening scene a lot of times because it's on a lot of filmmaking videos that I watch. So even though I've never seen the movie, I understand why you would have that on your list. So, number 9 for me is not the most dynamic opening scene, but it is a perfect opening scene for literally like any movie. This movie is considered by many to be perfect, and that is Back to the Future. The opening scene of Back to the Future gives you so much information that is used later on in the movie. It tells you almost everything about the movie in like 5 minutes,
Right.
without telling you anything about the movie. It's perfect. We got the newscast about about Doc stealing the
Plutonium being stolen, right?
We get the clocks, we get Einstein, we see all of his experiments, we understand the dynamic between Doc and Marty when he shows up at Doc's house and he's not there. We understand so much about their relationship and who Doc is and how chaotic he is and the kind of person that Marty is. He's never on time and
Right.
he's kind of all over the place. And so is Doc. It's perfect exposition without much exposition.
It's the perfect example of showing over telling. We
Yes,
see it
yes.
all rather than
Yes.
somebody explaining. We see Doc's obsession with time with all the clocks and how he set them all perfectly, however many minutes forward it is or whatever, and that's when Marty realizes he's late for school. And we see, part of the reason why Marty probably likes spending time at Doc's house because he's built this giant amplifier for his guitar.
Right.
And everything. So yeah, it's a great, I'm ashamed to admit this is actually not on my list and it should have been probably because this is a great opening scene.
Yeah, absolutely.
Number 8 for me is also not really a dynamic scene. Like, it's not like a James Bond action opener, it's very simple, but it is very effective. And I forget what year this movie is. I think it's 1977, but it's Saturday Night Fever. And it is John Travolta walking down the street carrying a can of paint to the Bee Gees' Staying Alive. And it just works so well. And it's another thing you kind of, who this character is immediately.
Mhm.
Just watching him walk down the street and kind of looking in the windows and checking out like the clothing that he sees in one store window and stuff like that. And like checking his shoes, comparing his shoes to the shoes in the window and stuff. It's a great, great opening scene. And
I haven't seen that movie since I was a kid. I need to rewatch that.
I watch it every few years, probably. Maybe once every 10 years maybe or something. And I haven't watched it in quite a while, but I really like that movie, even though it is very of its time with the disco dancing and everything. There's a lot more to the movie than that. And I remember being very surprised when I saw it the first time, how the disco dancing is, he wants to be a dancer, but that's not really it's not really a disco movie, even though that's what it's kind of seems to be. There's a lot more to it. And the friend who is wanting to jump off the bridge and all that stuff. Like it's a heavy movie at times. So I really like that movie. I think it's pretty good, but that opening scene is iconic and has been parodied several times. And even John Travolta parodied it.
Like last Christmas or something.
Yeah. Where he was Santa Claus walking down the street. Yeah. So, definitely iconic.
Awesome. Number 8 for me. This is a movie that we haven't done a proper episode on it, but we've discussed it a few times before. I am not too fond of this movie, and recently I discovered that I'm not alone in that, considering how iconic and instrumental this movie is to the history of filmmaking. But that is 2001: A Space Odyssey. That is obviously, one of the best opening scenes of any feature, because it works so well on a thematic level.
Right.
We're in prehistoric Earth, and we see it's basically explaining human ingenuity and technology through these prehistoric apes, and we get the the bone flip.
Yeah. That's what I was gonna say. It's like the greatest jump cut in cinema history. Yeah.
Yeah. Does like you said, the greatest match cut in cinema history. It's fantastic. And I was thinking about Barbie. Barbie did a similar thing in their trailer. I was like, this movie is gonna be good. And then Barbie actually turned out to be very good.
Yeah, it was.
But I would like from that trailer, because I was iffy about that movie. Because I was like, how are they gonna make a movie out of Barbie?
Right. Yeah.
But when I saw the trailer, I kind of figured what she was going for with that. But going back to 2001, yeah, I'm not, like I said, I'm not a huge fan of this movie. It's a beautiful movie from a cinematography standpoint. It's one of the best looking movies ever, but it's kind of hard to follow because it's so dull. And normally that doesn't bother me because I like slow burns, but I can't get with that one.
I can understand that. I think I like it a little bit more than you. However, I would say if you ever get the chance to see it in the theater, that's the best way to see it, I think.
Okay.
You know, where you're seeing it on the big screen. And yes, it's very slow paced, but at least like for me, because I just can be so distracted by everything in my house and my phone and all that stuff. Being in a theater where I can't pause it and I can't look at my phone, that's the best way to experience that movie, I think, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool. Good choice. Also not on my list. Number 7 for me, I think you're going to be surprised that it's this low, and that it's not my like top 5 or even maybe not even my number 1. But that is 1993's Jurassic Park, directed by Steven Spielberg.
That isn't even on my list.
That's all right. I almost debated not putting it on my list either because it's a great opening scene, but like I just felt like there was a lot of other movies that kind of had better opening scenes. But the more I thought about it, I was like, no, it's a really good opening scene with the introduction to the island, the introduction to the Velociraptor without really even seeing the Velociraptor, but just seeing what the Velociraptor can do. Yeah. I'm sure I told this story when we did Jurassic Park 11 years ago when John and I did it, but I'm going to retell it. So I saw this movie when I was 9 years old, and my brother was actually seeing it with like a neighbor kid and his family, I guess, and invited me. And I asked my mom if I could go, and she was like, it might be scary. You know, I don't know. If you want to see it, that's fine. But she was basically like, don't come crying to me later. And I was like, okay. And so I was excited. I wanted, it's dinosaurs. I wanted to go see it. We get to the movie a little bit late, I think. And my brother is in line to get popcorn. And I go, I'm going to go see if the movie has started. So I go to the auditorium and I walk in during this scene. And so I don't remember exactly where we were in the scene, but I remember walking in and just seeing this guy being like dragged up and down by the Velociraptor and Muldoon holding him and going, shoot her, shoot her. And I'm in the back of the room, a little 9-year-old, and I'm going, I may have made a mistake. It's like, this may have been a mistake. But I ended up loving the movie, and of course, it's now my favorite movie of all time. And so, yeah, it's just it's a magnificent opening scene. I love the cinematography in that opening scene too, with like the light coming through the trees and the kind of the, I don't know if it's smoke, but like the fog and stuff. It's really cool.
Awesome.
Number 7 for you.
Number 7. I already mentioned this movie, but I'm gonna go ahead and just talk about it real quick. One of the greatest movies of all time. Like I said, it whenever you see a certain thing, you immediately think of this movie, and that is Jaws. Whenever you see water, you immediately think of the opening scene of Jaws with the chick skinny dipping in the water, and she gets eaten.
Dragged around in the water.
Yeah, she gets dragged around, but it did it in such a suspenseful way. You didn't see the shark. And it builds so much tension with her getting pulled, like yanked under the water, then coming back up, yanked under the water, then dragged around, and then she's eaten.
Right. It's like the shark was playing with her, really,
Yes, he was playing with his food.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is an iconic opening scene, and it holds up. It's still very, very effective.
I agree. Good choice. That also is on my list, but a little bit higher up. So
Nice.
We'll talk about it some more, I guess. Number 6 for me might be a little bit criminally low to you. But it is also one of the greatest opening scenes of all time, in my opinion. And that is 1999's The Matrix.
Hey.
The introduction to Trinity and the agents and the whole fight scene. Your men are already dead. That whole thing is just, it's that. So I think I've told this before too, I'm pretty sure, but like I went into The Matrix without knowing anything. The only thing I had seen for The Matrix was one little TV spot where Morpheus jumps from one roof to the other and Keanu goes, whoa. So I knew nothing about the film. After that opening scene, I was like, oh, this is cool. I was again, just like Gangs of New York, I was hooked. And I was obsessed with that movie back in 1999. And, the opening scene just pulls you right in, gives you a lot of information without being, super. I mean, that movie does have exposition in it. It kind of has to build for the world building and all that stuff. But that opening scene creates the mystery and just makes you want to know more. What is going on? Who are these people?
Absolutely.
Why? How is she able to do that? That type of stuff. It's so good.
Absolutely. Obviously it's on my list, but it's higher. So
right.
We'll circle.
We'll talk
back
about
to
it some more. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Number 6 for me, Star Wars: A New Hope. Fantastic opening scene. You are literally thrust right into the action, and it like the opening scene lives up to the movie's name. You're thrown right into the middle of the war amongst the stars. It is
right.
It is fantastic, and like just seeing I'm drawing a blank here.
The Star Destroyer.
The Star Destroyer. Thank you. Seeing the Star Destroyer come from behind and like just fill up the screen like that.
Right.
And like it was so awesome. I remember being a little kid and just being amazed at how just epic the opening scene was.
Yeah.
And it like many of these opening scenes that we've already listed and will list, it stands the test of time. It is so good. And the thing that makes it so good is because it's practical.
Right.
It was like a real like miniature, but they put so much thought and detail into it that it looked so believable, even though it was so fantastical.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. This is on my list. We'll circle back around to it again too as well. So I'll have more to say, but pretty much echoing what you just said as well.
Yeah.
Number 5 for me is another Spielberg film, and that's 1981's Raiders of the Lost Ark, our introduction to Indiana Jones. Again, another iconic opening scene, the going into the temple and then stealing the idol and the giant boulder rolling, him having to outrun the boulder and all that stuff. Just again, sets the movie up for, that this is going to be a really fun adventure film. Indiana Jones is a cool character who knows what he's doing, and it's become iconic, and I can't deny that it deserves a spot in the top 5.
That's on my list.
I knew we were going to have overlap on this list, so it's not surprising.
Number 5 for me, easily the greatest opening scene of a traditional superhero movie ever, and that is Man of Steel. I love this opening scene. It is so epic. It throws you right into the world of Krypton and this DC universe that Zack Snyder has created. What it does perfectly is set the tone for the rest of the movie. Like it doesn't treat the movie like it's a joke in any way. Like it sets the stakes are so high because we're like minutes before the destruction of Krypton. And it does it in such an interesting way because oftentimes we've seen Krypton in other films and in animation, and the you don't necessarily feel the stakes because Kryptonians have often been shown to be kind of a little stoic,
Hmm.
not necessarily passive, but
And the Richard Donner
just,
Superman, they're very cold. They're
they're very cold, and that's
also
represented in the world because it's like it's an ice
world.
world.
And they're not even present when Jor-El is they're doing like the trial of the Zod and everybody.
Right.
The council is they're just faces. They're not even actually present.
Right.
And so it feels very kind of
disconnected.
Yes, that's the exact word I was looking for. And so this was a lot different than what we had seen before, and and I agree, it worked really well.
And it was that, I think what Zack Snyder was trying to go for was trying to have it be a reflection of our world and how we treat the planet, and we're exhausting all of our natural resources, and Zack Snyder and David S. Goyer, they were saying eventually this might happen to our planet if we keep going down the path we're going. So it was very dynamic. It was awesome, but it was very introspective at the same time.
Yeah, for sure. That's a good choice. That one's actually not on my list, but that is a good choice.
You should be ashamed of yourself.
Number 4 for me is a movie we've already talked about, and that is Steven Spielberg's Jaws.
Yeah.
Again, I'm just echoing what you said before. Iconic opening scene. What Psycho did for people with taking showers, Jaws did for going to the beach. And every time I go to the beach and get into that water, I think about Jaws. Yeah, I think about this scene, and I think about the scene with the little boy on the raft, and so yeah, it's amazing, and it also just sets up the movie perfectly. That's what a good opening scene should do: is number 1, hook you, but also number 2, just kind of let you know what movie you're in for. And this opening scene did exactly that.
Oh yeah, for sure. Number 4 for me, horror movie, and that is Scream. The opening scene with Drew Barrymore, fantastic, because it not only sets the tone for the movie, lets you know what this movie is going to be about, but it tricks you because it has this big star in the opening of the movie. And I think I don't remember the marketing for this movie, but I think she was kind of marketed heavily.
I'm pretty sure she was. Yeah. She's like the center person on the poster and everything too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And they kill her brutally within the first 10 minutes of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
I remember seeing this opening scene when I was way too young to see it. And my jaw was on the floor.
Yeah.
Like you saw everything. You saw all of her guts. It was it definitely left an impression on me. But again, I've grown to have more appreciation for it because my knowledge of film and movies and storytelling has grown. So I understand more of what they were going for with that opening scene and setting up the meta aspect and a little bit of the parody and the movie trivia. Like it's really it's aesthetically pleasing to horror fans as well as film buffs.
Right. 100% agree with everything you said. And I, unfortunately for me, I didn't get to experience this like in the theater when it came out. And so by the time I actually got around to watching it, I think I knew that Drew Barrymore didn't make it past the opening scene. So it wasn't a surprise for me, unfortunately. But putting yourself into that mindset, going to see Scream, thinking that Drew Barrymore is the star of this movie, and then she gets killed off in the opening scene, had to have been just shocking.
Yeah.
And it's very similar to Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, where Janet Leigh was kind of, I believe, advertised as being the star of Psycho and the lead character, and she lasts longer than Drew Barrymore does, but she's
about halfway through the movie. Yeah.
Right. She still gets murdered, and then it becomes Anthony Perkins' movie from there on. It is a phenomenal opening scene. It's one of my I'm not much of a horror guy. I'm very picky about my horror films, and that is absolutely one of my favorite horror films of all time.
Yeah.
And part of that is because of its just the movie talk within the film, and
Yeah.
how there's certain rules. It's like they're in a horror movie, but they don't know they're in a horror movie kind of thing. It's just
Right.
great. Really, really good. Great choice.
Absolutely.
Number 3 for me is, I know this is on your list. I'm curious if it's, your number 1 or not, but it is 2008's The Dark Knight, Christopher Nolan. The prologue, if you will. Our introduction to the Joker, our introduction to this, Gotham had already been established in Batman Begins, but it set up the tone for the movie. There was so much talk about how Nolan was inspired by Michael Mann's Heat, and it's pretty evident in this opening scene. It just feels like it could have been a Michael Mann action film kind of thing, and Joker's introduction, pulling off the mask, what doesn't kill you makes you stranger, is just, and seeing that on an IMAX screen was one of the greatest things I've ever experienced. I'm ashamed to admit the first time I saw this scene, because they released this prologue before I Am Legend in the IMAX screens. And I never drove out to see I Am Legend in the IMAX. I went and saw it in the regular theater, and I saw the regular Dark Knight trailer beforehand, and I was kind of dying to see the prologue. And so I watched a pirated version of it the very first time I saw it. Very shortly after that, the Batman Begins Blu-ray came out, and it was included on the Blu-ray. And I bought that Blu-ray, and I watched that prologue 1,000 times. And I even showed it to everybody. I was like, you've got to see this. And nobody was, people were impressed, but like nobody was obsessed with it. None of my friends were obsessed with it like I was. I was watching it over and over and over again. And so, yeah, anyway, it's one of the greatest opening. It's one of the greatest. It's in my opinion, it is the greatest comic book opening of all time, comic book movie opening.
Yeah.
And it's also one of the greatest movie openings of all time.
Yeah. Yeah. I spoke prematurely when I was talking about Man of Steel, because I forgot that was on my list. I don't know how I forgot that, but yeah. So yeah, it's on my list. We're going to talk about it in a second, but
this is the movie I mentioned before we started recording that I had put my top 10 list together and then realized I was missing a very important movie. This was the movie that I had almost forgotten to put on my list.
Oh, wow. Wow. My number 3, The Matrix, the greatest movie ever made, with one of the greatest opening scenes ever made. Just echoing everything that you said, just it sets up the kind of world and the kind of adventure that we are in for. I know every line in that opening scene. It's like from the very beginning, like from the logo. I know I've said this 1,000 times before. I'm gonna say it one more time. The feeling that goes through my body when that music plays and you see the reflective green Warner Brothers logo.
Right.
It is almost orgasmic. I love this movie. It is the single most influential movie I have ever seen. I reference this movie almost every day whenever I'm talking to people in normal conversation, because it is so rich and so dense with information and philosophy and psychology. It is just it's a wonderful movie. But this opening scene, just like I was watching this movie, and I had the philosopher's commentary on, and it was Dr. Cornel West, and I forget who the other guy was, but some older guys, and I believe they made that when it was like during like maybe the 15th anniversary of the Matrix, so like 10 years ago. To hear these, two of the smartest men, especially Dr. Cornel West. Like I've always admired Cornel West, and to hear him kind of fanboy out over this opening scene, it brought so much joy to me. Because he does make an appearance later in the trilogy in Reloaded, but to to hear him just kind of just adore this opening scene and just be and he's not he wasn't a doctor, he wasn't a philosopher at that point, he was just a fan, and it just
Mhm.
it was so heartwarming to hear him feel the way that I felt watching this opening scene.
Yeah, that's awesome. Top two, number two for me. It's a film we've already
Yes,
talked
sir.
about, and it is, you know, an iconic opening scene, and that is Scream. Wes
Yep.
Craven's Scream. This movie, for better or worse, brought back the slasher genre. I mean, it just I don't really know what else to say about it that we haven't already said. I mean, it was just it's an incredible opening scene. It's been parodied, it's been, copied. But it also is, I mean, you can't when you when you ask somebody what's your favorite scary movie, you think of Scream,
You
obviously.
immediately
So
think of Scream.
you immediately think of Drew Barrymore popping popcorn on the stove and talking on the phone.
Yeah.
So yeah, awesome opening scene. We knew what we were in for after that scene, but we were also surprised when Drew Barrymore, well, not me necessarily, but the audience was surprised when Drew Barrymore was killed off, and yeah, just amazing.
Number two for me, we've already talked about this movie, but we're gonna talk about it again because it's one of the greatest movies ever, and that is 2008's The Dark Knight. Echoing everything you said, the introduction to the Joker is one of, if not the best character introduction ever. I love that opening shot of the Joker standing on
Yes, with his
on
back to the
corner.
camera on the street
Yeah,
corner.
yeah. It's fantastic. And we're supposed to not know who it is, but we immediately know who it is.
Know who it is. Yes, of course.
And it just builds up incredible tension because you're waiting to see his full face and get that full reveal, and we finally get it at the end of the scene after that awesome
in an extreme close up. Yeah.
Yes. Christopher Nolan throws you right into it. He's like, I've teased you long enough. You're gonna see his full face, and it's great. And I love the way that scene plays out. Once each phase of the heist is done, one guy kills the other guy, they move on to the next phase, and it's fantastic. And it just crescendos to when we finally get into the bank lobby, and it is fantastic. And
the bus coming barreling in.
You got the legendary William Fichtner.
Yes, so good.
And his iconic line delivery. You and your friends are dead.
The guy that hired yous, they'll just do the same to you. And I have to give credit to William Fichtner too, because I feel like, every now and again, I because I wanted to be an actor before, I always think about how I would perform stuff. And the line where he says, "What do you believe in?" Huh? What do you believe in? He commits to that, because I feel like it's setting up that line. I believe what doesn't kill you makes you stranger.
Mm-hmm.
But he delivers it so well, and it makes it believable within the scene. Whereas I feel like they were so smart to cast William Fichtner in that role, even though it was so small, because casting a less seasoned actor, I don't think would have delivered those lines as well. And
I agree.
The scene not work as well.
I agree. And the thing about it, knowing how Christopher Nolan directs, he doesn't give a whole lot of direction. He lets the actors do what they do. He hired them for a reason. He just lets them do their job.
Right.
And and for William Fichtner to have that much insight into that little bit of character, to deliver that line the way he delivered it, because I don't think the writer intended him to yell that line and put so much emphasis on it.
Right.
And the fact that William Fichtner had enough insight to do that just hammers it home.
Yeah.
Thematically, it hammers it home.
Absolutely. I expected this to be your number one, so now I'm trying to figure out what your number one is.
We've already talked about it.
We have? Okay, so maybe I might know what it is then. So for me, my number one is a movie we've already talked about. And that is Star Wars: A New Hope. That, I mean, if we were doing top 10 opening shots, this would also be number one because Star Destroyer coming across the screen, the top of the screen. I wish I could have been in the audience in 1977 and watched them watching it for the first time.
Could you imagine sitting on the front row?
I mean, I feel like, people they went and saw Star Wars and then like you see the first spaceship and you're like, this is cool. And then the second one comes, you're like, all right. And then it just keeps on going. And you're like it's just so like mind blowing. And then on top of that, going into the actual opening scene, like we're I thought it's so genius that we're introduced immediately to the first characters we meet are C-3PO and R2-D2. We're introduced to the droids. And so again, we're kind of establishing the world and then the introduction of Darth Vader. I mean, it's just everything in this opening scene, just firing on all cylinders, works perfectly. And it, of course, has become one of the greatest movies of all time. So
yeah,
I could not deny that it deserved the number one spot.
Yeah. Did you have any honorable mentions?
Oh yeah. Well, not many actually. The Lord of War. I had forgotten about this opening scene when I was doing some research about opening scenes. Lord of War kept coming up, and so I went to YouTube and watched it. And it's a lot of the YouTube videos name it "The Life of a Bullet," and you see the metal getting. It's like a POV shot of a bullet, and you see the metal getting pressed and it getting put into the crate and delivered, and it ends with it getting fired out of a gun and coming right towards a child's head. And so it is very what's the word I'm looking for? It's very
visceral.
Yes, yeah, it's very visceral. It's very the CGI doesn't quite hold up anymore. Unfortunately, it looks a little computer generated, I would say, but it is still quite a good opening scene. And then the other one I had written down was The Social Network. Again, it's a very dialogue heavy Aaron Sorkin opening scene between Jesse Eisenberg and Rooney Mara, just sitting at the sitting in like a bar talking to each other, and they I think it's been a while since I've seen the movie, so I forget exactly, but I think they end up breaking up at the end of the scene or something like that.
Yeah.
And
breaks up
it's a really, I can't remember how many minutes it is, but it's a long dialogue scene, but it is also just so well written, and David Fincher does a great job shooting it, and they do a fantastic job acting in it, that it almost made my list. And then the last honorable mention is Drive. Nicholas Winding Refn's Drive with Ryan Gosling. The opening heist, we see him. The first shot of the movie is him in like a hotel room or whatever, telling people where he'll meet them and things like that, and blah 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 blah. And then we see him being the driver to a heist and pulling it off, escaping from the cops, pulling into a parking garage where like an LA Clippers game has just gotten out, and he puts a Clippers hat on and walks away with the crowd. It's just like that opening scene was really cool.
Awesome. My honorable mentions before I get to my my number one, Jurassic Park, obviously. And I didn't put it on my main list for the same reasons you weren't gonna put it on your list. It's just it is as great as this movie is in its entirety.
Right.
The opening scene, while very good, isn't to me as strong as the
some of these
that we have we've mentioned.
Sure.
Especially Spielberg's other opening scenes.
Yeah.
But that being said, that doesn't mean that it's not great. It's still great. Right. But there were just a lot of other movies that I had to put over it. The Matrix Reloaded. That's another great opening scene that is similar to the first one, but it's a lot more dynamic. We get a lot more bullet time with that opening scene, where she crashes through the window. She's falling with her back to the ground. It's fantastic. And then we realize it's a dream sequence. Yeah. It's so good. So good. The Prince of Egypt. This is a masterpiece of animated cinema. And that opening sequence of the killing of the firstborn and sending Moses down the Nile is one of the most beautifully animated scenes I've ever seen in any movie. The whole movie is a beautiful movie. I don't know if we've talked. Have you seen it?
I have not seen it. We've talked about it before, but I have not seen this movie yet.
we got to talk about that movie. Like we have to.
Okay. All right.
But yeah, that opening scene is so good. The animation in that movie was so unique because now they made 2 or 3 other movies that had similar animation, but that was like the first of its kind, and it was so dynamic and detailed. It was it's just so beautiful. And I got one more. It's Zack Snyder's Justice League. I love the opening scene to this movie. Because it picks up right at the end, or not at the very end, but at the when Superman sacrifices himself to kill Doomsday, and it's from the world's perspective.
Right.
And we see that figuratively the bell has been rung, and that bell is the death of Superman. And we see like the sound waves resonating like literally throughout the entire planet. And the mother boxes wake up. We see Cyborg. We're introduced to Atlantis. We're reintroduced to Themyscira. Yeah. And it's you see the impact of Superman and just how much he meant to this universe. And that it perfectly sets up the rest of the film. It's a beautiful opening scene. It's some of the best usage of slow motion in a Zack Snyder movie.
Yeah, I agree. Good choice. Good choices, I should say.
Yeah.
All right, number one. I already said my number one, so go ahead and you're number one.
Raiders of the Lost Ark.
That's what I figured. When you said we talked about it, I was like, it's got to be that one.
Yeah, Raiders of the Lost Ark. When you think of when I was thinking about doing this list, and I had suggested it to you, the first 3 scenes that came to mind: Matrix, Dark Knight, Raiders of the Lost Ark. Raiders of the Lost Ark is the opening scene of opening scenes. Personally, I don't think it gets more iconic than Raiders of the Lost Ark. Even if you haven't seen the movie, you've seen this opening scene 30,000 times because it's been parodied. It played on a lot of like ads when I was a kid. It's just, it's a perfect opening scene. We understand the kind of person that Indy is. It sets up that you're really gonna go for a really big adventure on this movie, and it's just like I said, it's the opening scene of opening scenes. It doesn't get any more iconic than this opening scene.
Yeah. I got nothing else to add to that. I mean, it's true. Indiana Jones, the boulder, all that stuff we talked about it was my number 5. And it is, and you got to give credit to Spielberg because he 2 movies on your list, 3 on mine because I included Jurassic Park. I mean, that guy knows what he's doing, I guess. But also give credit to George Lucas because Star Wars Raiders was his idea, and I'm pretty, he didn't write the screenplay, but he wrote the story, so I wouldn't be surprised if that opening scene was an idea he had with the boulder and all that.
Yeah.
So. George Lucas deserves some credit there as well.
Absolutely.
Good choices. Raiders can't deny. A part of me almost wonders if I should have moved mine a little bit higher. I had it below Jaws, and I'm like, well, you know what? Raiders might be more iconic than Jaws, but I'll leave my list how it is. Yeah. Well, I guess that's our top 10 list of our favorite opening scenes of all time. We'd love to hear from you about your favorite scenes of all time. What are your favorite opening scenes of all time? Did we leave anything off the list that you would have included? You can always let us know at cinemaheroes.com. You can comment on our Instagram posts at cinemaheroes, or if you're watching this on YouTube, leave a comment down below. Give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I think that about wraps it up for this episode, though. I'm Justin Speck.
I'm Jay Stu.
As always, thanks for listening. Thanks for subscribing.